Greetings. Thank you for tuning in to the second episode of Masculine Militia. My name is Antonio Alicina. In this episode, I'm going to go into the introduction of Masculine Militia. That's something that I was going to do on the first episode. But instead of going into it on the first episode, I actually went into the uproar now surrounding Mr. David Chappelle and his last stand-up, The Closer, on Netflix. The issues basically had to do with his jokes and basic commentary and criticism of the LGBTQ community. Mr. Chappelle has found himself again in what I guess the proverbial hot water. So I went into that some, and I like to recap it a little bit and then get into the introduction of Masculine Militia, talk about what Masculine Militia is about, talk about what we intend to feed the people who listen to us. But right now, I like to do a little recap. And so what happened is, and I'm sure many people know it by now, Mr. Chappelle on his stand-up, he actually had some criticism for the LGBT community more so than individuals, although he did reference one particular individual that he said was his friend that passed away who was a trans person. And but the LGBTQ community actually, as a community, and those that represent them as a community, found issues with what Mr. Dave Chappelle had to say about them. And my commentary about that in the first episode had to do with the fact that people who criticize or disagree with groups like the LGBTQ community usually find themselves in hot water. There is no criticism that you can levy against the LGBTQ community without that criticism being looked at as hate speech. The central motivation for disagreeing with them or critiquing them, as they have made it seem, is hate. That becomes the central motivation from their perspective. And since hate is something that has been taken and used as a label and then weaponized against those who supposedly possess it against any group, that person or that group is now called for to be ostracized. And today we call it canceling. And I talked about how the only way you can cancel someone, those who have the power not only to cancel, but in order to have that power, they have to have the power to be able to put that person out there in the public sphere in the first place. So anybody who says something that critiques the LGBT community, as well as disagree with them, disagree with their behavior. You can't disagree with their behavior, because what has happened is there is this philosophy of, or this trope, or this thing that people now have grabbed onto, that basically wants to make sure that whatever behavior that they have or whatever they do is beyond reproach. And that is to utter the words, "This is my truth," or "I'm living in my truth." Live in your truth. So now that is to say, you above reproach, because your truth, you have the right to live in your truth. This is what is being said, because truth is paramount. If a person is living in their truth, if this is my truth, quote unquote, my truth, then for people to say that, this is to say that anyone who has anything against or disagrees with that person living in their quote unquote truth, then they are automatically incorrect because there's nothing greater than truth. You go down from there. Truth is the highest, you go down from there. Nothing is above truth. So if a person says, I'm living in my truth, then that person is then saying, whatever you have to say about what I'm living in is automatically incorrect. So having that kind of thought, belief, that truth is now a subjective thing, that I possess it, and when I possess it, there's nothing that you can say against me because I possess truth. I'm living in my truth. So anybody that comes and disagrees with what I'm living in, their disagreement is automatically incorrect because they can't be true. This is what basically the foundation of this particular mindset is. If you're a trans person, a homosexual, or anything like that, it has been shaped in our society that people who are like that are now encouraged to live in their truth, to be whomever they have now decided they should be. Because for so long in this society, or at least in the recent 100 years or so, homosexuality and living that type of life wasn't necessarily publicly accepted. So many people hid their homosexuality. Although throughout America, throughout the world, there have been these enclaves of societies living in secret with much of what they do is based in the homosexual behavior. Man-boy clubs, man, boy. It was mostly the males who had control of that. Women were mainly brought into that group, even though there were people women who lived secret lives, liking and loving each other also, as they call it, loving. That was happening, but females didn't run the society. So if they were going to be women loving women, a woman having sex with another woman, that had to be at the pleasure of males in order to be accepted. Not in and of itself, by itself, was it accepted nearly as much by men. So we've had it in our society. There's been this hiding of it, particularly, like I said, in the last 100 years. And then when there's been this coming out, they call it. People finding their voice, they call it. To live this life, the encouragement and the protections provided to these people come from the very top. Come from the very top. And when I mean very, very top in this context, I'm talking about the government, people in power and rulership, because a lot of those people were already hiding and still hiding the fact that they themselves are in homosexual relationships or have behavior where they have sex with the same sex, things of that nature. A lot of them are still hiding. So many of them covertly have supported homosexuality, LGBTQ community. They've always supported it in one way or another. Even some of those who spoke out against it publicly. They would speak out against it publicly, but they themselves, even though they're speaking out against it publicly, many of them were practicing homosexuality as they spoke out against it in public. So when we look at how this community, LGBT community, is behaving, they have been given juice. They have been given juice, yet they are considered a marginalized group. How? How is the LGBT community a marginalized group? Some, even some black people, have placed this group in the same oppressed class as black people. Think about that. The same oppressed class as black people. How? I mean, let's look at it. Black people in America, around the world, oppressed, destroyed, murdered, raped, colonialized. This is what's happened and more. Many of our ancestors came here from Africa to be made slaves. Many of us were already on American soil. Some called us Indians. But we were already here, many of us. But then there were those that were brought here also. And the systematic destruction of us began to take place at least 300 years before the transatlantic slave trade. So in America, I, like many of us in America, black people, our first language is English. English is our first language. Why? Because we were brought here, or we were captured while we were here, and our language had been systematically through torture and other means stripped from us. So now most of us have no idea. The average black person has no idea what their original language was. None. The average black person has no idea who their great-great-great-grandfather was, or great-great-great-grandmother was. Some of us have no idea who our great-great-grandmothers and fathers are. If you go past America and the records that they kept or keep because they had slaves, and they kept records of the births to some degree, you can get an idea, but you have to really, really go look. Hire somebody. It costs money, but the average person doesn't know. Then when you get past America to find out where that person or where I come from, let's say we were in Africa. My people are from Africa. Have no idea. I don't know. And the average person doesn't either. So we have no memory of where we're from, where we come from, who we are. There is no connection to our original thinking process, culture, who we were, how did we behave, what we did before coming here. Wiped our memories, stripped of our language, have no idea of the culture, our life in outside of this place. We have no idea. The average person doesn't. So, black people in America don't know the original language, don't know their language, don't know what language they spoke, so we speak the language of the oppressor, the colonizer, the destroyer. Destroyed our ability to speak the language that we speak and gave us his language. Wiped out the memory of who we were and replaced it with the hate that they had for us as a memory of us. And so that contributes heavily to how we look at ourselves. So the LGBTQ community is in that class? They're in the class with a people who have been killed, murdered, raped systematically. Not just as a matter of social processes, people in society just doing it. No, that has been government sanctioned. Laws have been on the books, and some still are. And the ones that are on the books now that don't say outright that you could kill or murder a person because they're black. You can kill a black man. It may not be on the books. Some of them aren't on the books just outright. But the process of justice for those who are murdered, raped, deprived, oppressed is such a process to where justice is denied. But we get lip service. Is the LGBT community, that's what they get? No. Because the power that they have now is a witness to the fact that they're not oppressed. They have the power. Listen, Mr. Hart, the comedian, he wanted to host the Oscars, right? And he made did a tweet, I believe, years prior. And that tweet was brought up years later, and the LGBTQ community said, He said something remotely critiquing, disagreeing, made a joke about the LBGT community. So they had the power to have Kevin Hart removed from hosting the Oscars. They had the power to do that. They've had the power recently. The baby. He said something where he put in a sentence AIDS and oral sex at a concert. He was being glib. He couldn't even utter those words. Because you know what? The LBGTQ community says, Mr. DaBaby started being ostracized from being able to be in festivals, do concerts, promote. People just, no, we're not going to deal. No. Because of the comments that he made, blah, blah, blah. That's what they can do. So if they can do that, they can stop this man, Kevin Hart, who has made millions of dollars, who has some power in that particular context, in that particular field, in terms of having money and influence. They got more influence than he does, because he couldn't stop them from coming against him for what he said or supposedly said concerning the LBGTQ community years prior. They went and dug up something from years prior. Like, I'm the same person I was 15 years ago. I'm in some cases, in some ways I am, but in others I'm not. But they went back, got his old tweet, used that to influence. They used their influence to get him removed from hosting the Oscars. They used their influence to have DaBaby not be welcomed to perform at any venues, in festivals. Here's a guy that has talked about drugs, murder, and all these things. And I'm not castigating him specifically for those things right now. What I am doing is I'm pointing out that those things are things that are negative. They're harmful. You can say the word nigger as much as you want. You can talk about killing someone as much as you want, as long as it's another black person. Because when Ice-T made a record a while ago, years ago, I think it was called Cop Killer. Oh, no. They took that off the shelves. You can't say that. You can't talk about killing no cops. No. Because they understand what that will do to the population. Just like they understand saying about killing other black men and killing other people, using drugs, all of those things. They know what that does to the people too. But they're okay with that. They're not okay if it's talking about, because trust me, if one of these or two of these or three of these rappers start talking about killing white people, it would be off. They would cut them off. But they can talk about killing black people all they want. But you can't say anything against the LBGTQ community. Not even remotely criticizing them. Can't do it. Can't do it. Don't say anything to criticize the LBGTQ community. Don't even disagree with them. Don't even disagree. Because if you do, you're gonna have some problems. So Dave Chappelle, again, as well as a few other celebrities, but we're just gonna focus on and other people. We're just gonna focus on Dave Chappelle right now. He's getting backlash. Because the narrative is that the LGBT community is under assault. They're under assault. Those who represent organizations that take up for them They give the narrative that trans people are being slaughtered in the streets for being trans. That's the narrative they give. Trans people, let me tell you something. If you are a gay person, I don't think you should be denied to have a job because you're gay. I don't think you should be denied to have a job because you're trans or lesbian or queer. I don't think you should be treated inhumanely because you're any of those things. You should have human treatment, human rights. Yes. Now, if you as a trans gay person, LGBTQ person, if you do something according to your behavior, the behavior that comes out of being who you are, or any behavior, actually, that is contrary to, I'll say, right human order, then your issues can be pointed out. Look, man, you're doing this and that's not right. You are not above criticism. You are not above reproach. You're not above reproach. But they make it seem as if, yeah, you are. Yeah, I am. Why? Because of them living in their truth, because truth is the highest order. So because of that, it's like, oh no, you're beyond reproach, sir, ma'am. But you're not. You can be criticized. You're not right all the time. You're not correct all the time. People can disagree with your behavior, but we have people who are not LGBTQ who defend them, who are allies of them, and they don't even want to hear a disagreement. Somebody hear what I'm talking about right now? As far as they're concerned, this is transphobic. Just taking back the layers of the issue and examining them and having commentary about them. Transphobic, homophobic. This is crazy. Using the basic belief that doing any of that disagreeing, that may having commentary, that critiquing, the basic and central motivation for doing so, they want us to believe that basic and central motivation is hate. And that's just not true. I've gone sometimes to a restaurant and I didn't like the food. Now, I generally have a policy of sending food back to the kitchen, depending on where I am. But most times, I don't like to do that because I'm from a school of thought that the people in the kitchen now might not like the fact that I did that, and they may put some in my food or something, or their energy even. They put the energy in preparing what they're preparing for me now to say, you know what, it comes back, it's messed up. It's messed up, you know. So I don't like taking my food or putting my food back in the sending it back to the kitchen. I could be eating something and I can be like, man, these potatoes are fantastic, but this spinach is horrible. And when I tell them that, I've critiqued food that I'm ingesting, that I don't like the taste of it. Does that mean I hate the cook? Does that mean I hate the waiter? I might give the food to the person I'm with and be like, taste this. And they'd be like, I love it. And I'd be like, I can't stand it. Do I hate the person that likes it? Because I don't. I disagree with them that this food tastes good. So now, does that mean because I disagree with them that I hate them? That I don't like them anymore? We could even probably go into why it doesn't taste good to me. Well, you know what? I think I like a little bit more paprika on my stuff. That may change the chemistry of it to make it taste good. That person may be like, you know what? Yeah, but to me, it tastes just right like it is. I mean, if it had a little bit more salt, that would be good, but it's good like it is. But that doesn't mean I don't like them anymore. Or that I hate the cook. Or that I hate the waiter. I just don't agree that the food they sent me out here was tasty. So if we have a disagreement with the LGBTQ community, does that mean I hate them? If I disagree with their behavior, if I critique not just their behavior, but the use of the influence and power that they have amassed, does that mean I hate them? See, there is an idea in the world, particularly in this day and time, that basically people believe on some level, generally speaking, in our society, it's a growing thing, that if you disagree with someone, that somehow you have to dislike them or hate them. That hate has to be the motivation. And it's just not true. But what has happened is the LBGTQ community has used and weaponized the idea of hate for them to bring reprisals against people. And they are empowered by the powers that be. Powers that be. They're empowered by the government with laws. One of which is the Civil Rights Bill, which Lyndon Baines Johnson decided he was not going to sign it if it just was for black people. They had to insert the words sexual orientation and national origin in the bill. I think gender too. In the bill. It watered down what black people would be able to get in the Civil Rights Bill as far as anti-discrimination. That has been used, though, by groups, in particularly the LGBT community, as the laws that protect them, and the politicians and titans of industry being the media in Hollywood, many of them being homosexuals themselves. They have an investment in self-preservation. So the government, titans of industry, or mainly the Hollywood and media, social media, news, what they've done is they help protect them and propagate the behavior and legitimize the behavior. That's what they do. Okay. You do that. And when you do it at the expense of people who don't agree with you, because what happens is you have to snuff out any dissension, any disagreement, any criticism, because you're living in your truth and there's nothing greater than truth. And because there's nothing greater than truth and you're living in it, that means everyone that comes against or disagrees or critiques it, they are wrong. They are incorrect. So the label that is attached to people who critique and criticize and disagree with you is hate. And hate has no place among us. So you ostracize or cancel people at the insistence of groups that represent people in the society who are lesbian, gay, trans, queer. You go against, you say, oh no, we can't, no. Snuff them out. Take their livelihood away. You can't disagree. I mean, this is a dystopia. Are we headed to one? You cannot disagree. This actually is something that happens across many areas of our society, but we're just talking about this one right now. So the narrative that this community, LBGTQ community, gives is that basically they're under attack. That it really is costing lives. Trans people are being killed because they're trans. Gay people are being killed because they're gay. That's what they're saying. They're being killed because they're gay, because they're trans. Would it interest you to know that, well, first of all, that's the narrative. That trans people are under assault and being slaughtered in the streets. Would it interest you to know that according to the Human Rights Watch, 20 plus 8 trans or non-gender conforming people have been killed in America in 2021. This is October 2021. As of October 2021, 28. Look, man, one life killed because this is how you live, or this is who you are, this is what you look like. That's wrong. That's wrong. However, to say or to give the narrative that these people are being killed outright, slaughtered in the streets by the hundreds or something. That's the narrative. That's the picture they want people to have. Yet, the actual number is 28. As of right now. It could go up to 30 tomorrow. It may go up to 50. All of that is tragic. Again, We're talking about the narrative and we're talking about the facts. So don't move the goalposts and say, well, 28 people is bad. Yeah, it is. But that's not the goalpost that you have when you have the narrative that says, no, people are being killed wholesale. Tragic deaths, yes. But the narrative is that basically trans people, gay people, non-gender conforming people under attack. They're no more under attack. In fact, less of being under attack than black men being killed by the police in the United States unarmed for nothing. Oh, okay. In the world, the tracking of the Human Rights Commission, I think it's Human Rights Watch Commission. You can look it up yourself. In the world, 350 trans people worldwide. In 2021, as of October 2021, have been killed. And it's thought, I believe, that they were killed because they were trans. That's tragic. No one should be killed because they are gay or trans or lesbian or queer or any of that. Shouldn't happen. But the narrative is that there are hundreds of thousands of queer people, trans people who are being killed because they are trans or gay or non-gender non-conforming. That is the narrative. That is the picture that is given to people in our society so that we can now be like, no, something has to be done. And anybody saying something against them, I mean, it would incite others. Well, first of all, if that's the case, then let's go across the board with that kind of language, that kind of idea. If saying something against the LGBT community that is criticizing them or disagreeing with them or joking about them, if that incites people to hurt them, then we need to take a look at other things. Do we not? And really give as much energy to those things as we give to the LGBTQ community when they have an issue. 350 trans and gender non-conforming people worldwide. 28 in the United States as of October 2021. Killed, it has been determined by them, by the Human Rights Watch, that they were killed because they were of their lifestyle, the life they were living, being trans. That's what it is. Yet, how many of those people were killed in domestic violence situations? You didn't break that down, huh? Well, but we do have numbers that show that domestic violence among the LGBT community is greater, higher than the average norm, than the norm. There's trans on trans, gay on trans, trans on gay. Murder. Yeah. You got gay people who don't even like trans people, a lot of them. They war with themselves. Except when they have to come together, of course, to, influence, get some influence and have some power. I mean, of course. Black women, 4 black women or girls are murdered a day in America. 28 trans people total in 2021. 4 black women, girls murdered a day. 75,000 black women missing. Gone, kidnapped. Who cares for them? The LGBT community ain't coming out talking about them. They're not using their influence. If they're a so-called marginalized community, they're not using the influence of the marginalized, which they have influence in this so-called marginalized, as a marginalized group, supposedly. They're not putting focus on issues of black women missing, black women, 4 women, girls a day, black women being murdered. They're not focused on that. They're focused on their own power, on their own influence, on their own. They don't look out for others except lip service. That's what happens. That's what happens. Come on now. $75,000 black women gone, missing. 4 a day. Every day, killed, murdered. Black women, girls. Somebody say something about that? Did anybody say something about that? From the LGBT community side. I don't see them coming out using their influence. I ain't talking about some lip service or, you marching with somebody. Some of that happens. Some of it, sometimes. What's that? Because guess what? I see that if you want something to happen, you know how to get it to happen. Kevin Hart, he's a witness to that. Dave Chappelle is too, and others. Look at the baby. He know. If the LGBT community wants to have something happen, guess what? They can make it happen. But I don't see them doing nothing when it comes to these 75,000 missing black women and these 4 black women per day that are murdered since, you're supposed to be ally and marginalized oppressed group, that's equal in the same class as black people. I don't see that. That's a longer recap than I originally wanted to give. Masculine Militia, this show is about the propagation of masculinity. Okay. And masculine militia. Masculine militia is mostly it's a principle. Because I'm not suggesting a militia of us get together, go out with arms to somehow show we masculine. I don't know. It's a principle. Okay. I want to give the picture of a minority group that share in the knowledge, understanding, belief, and idea of masculinity as the supreme attribute of a man, for a man, rather. The supreme attribute for a man is masculinity. And I say a minority group of us because the idea, knowledge, understanding, and belief of masculinity is waning because those in power in the media, Hollywood, news media, social media, have propagated the idea that masculinity is somehow not good. In fact, there's this thing they call toxic masculinity, which there is no such thing. First, because people usually don't know what masculinity is. They just attribute masculinity to a male when he is doing something that if he were not a male, he may not be able to do. And they just call it masculinity. That's not masculinity. Masculinity is the fuel. It's the power that powers a male in the execution of his function. The greater the masculinity, the greater the desire and power that a male will have to execute his function. Function being the foundational three: protect, produce, and provide. The greater the masculinity, the greater the desire for that male to execute his desire and grow a desire, have a desire to protect. If he has low masculinity, he doesn't have much of a desire to protect. But if his masculinity is high, the higher it is, the more desirous he is of protecting, producing, and providing. That's masculinity. Masculinity is the energy that is produced by the male. And because some people that I know personally and others I've heard, they believe that masculinity and femininity reside in the male, as well as femininity and masculinity resides in the female. And I don't agree. I don't have a feminine side. No. If the idea is that the female has femininity and masculinity in her, and the male has the same in him, that idea comes about because of what I think is a misunderstanding of male-female. The male and female are two parts of one whole. Two parts of one whole. The whole is us together with two parts that come together. We come together, and we'll get into all of that another time. But the male and female are one, but two halves that make the one. So I am the masculine side, and you are the feminine side as the female. You're my feminine side because we're two halves of one whole. The one whole, my half is masculine. Your half is feminine. You are my feminine side. And if anything, I am your masculine side. But you don't have it in and of itself inside of you. No. No. We'll get into what femininity is later. So masculinity is a supreme attribute for a man. I'm a part of this militia. All right. There's no leader. They're only servants. There's no leader. I don't really like the word leader. I like the word servant. So sometimes I see people now using them together. Servant leader, And I understand. Because sometimes I might use it interchangeably because it's convenient in terms of, the language that we use. But most times I would definitely be saying and using the term servant. Only our adherence to the principles of masculinity produce, in this militia, produce the generals, the captains, lieutenants, and so forth. How much do we adhere to these principles, to the principle of masculinity? How? We are all disseminators of this knowledge, understanding, belief, and idea of masculinity. It's not just one person. It's not just me. I'm a servant. We all, as servants, may have different duties. Doesn't make mine any greater than someone else's. That's like the heart and the kidneys saying, or the liver, the heart and the liver being like, you know what, liver, I'm better. I'm needed more. And the liver say, no, I'm needed more. Well, I tell you what, don't worry about it. I'll just leave. And how many of us will do without a liver? Or you keep the liver, and how many of us will do without a heart? It's not about one being better or greater than the other. We're all servants. We just have different functions and different purposes. As individuals, or what we'll call individuals, we have different duties. We'll gain some servants. There'll be people who will come to our call and become a part of this militia. But then there will be others who won't, and that's fine. We're not against you. I would like to be more for than against anything. Some will come and be a part of this militia. There will be some who will come and they will remain, and there will be others who will come and they will not remain. It won't always be easy. The sound of my voice right now may not be heard by very many people right now. But I intend, with the help of the source, to have that change into many, 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 many people hearing this voice. Not because of my voice. It can be any voice that propagates, pushes the knowledge, the understanding, the belief in the idea of masculinity. We will get into femininity on the next episode. We'll talk about femininity, what it is. But we're going to also talk more about masculinity. That'll be coming up in episode 3 of Masculine Militia. I'd like to thank you for listening. I appreciate it. And bear with us. We intend to bring a lot to this conversation, and God willing, source willing, the world. Thank you. Yeah, have a nice day.